What's up everybody, it's Parker with BI Elite. In this video, we're going to learn about filter context, which is an incredibly important concept to understand if you are creating your own measures. This video that you're watching right now is actually a series of videos contained in our DAX Beginner Course hosted on the BI Elite training portal. So if you want to check that out, you can find it over at training.bielite.com. The link will be down in the description. Without further ado, let's hop on into our video on filter context and why it's so important. So now that we've created our first measure, let's talk more about filter context. If you recall, filter context is basically all of the filters that can be applied to a single measure to cause it to calculate a certain way. The most important thing to note about filter context is the 8 different places that filter context can be applied. And you can see numbers 1 through 8 on your screen, and we'll walk through each one of these individually. Although this is a course on DAX and not necessarily a Power BI functionalities course, we will still cover the ways that you might drill down or drill through and how that might affect the filter context. Firstly, slicers affect your DAX measure calculation. This is fairly obvious because if you change a selection within a slicer, it's going to filter down your data and show a different value coming out of that measure. Similarly, if we apply visual level filters, page level filters, or report level filters over in the filters pane, that will affect your measure calculation as well. These first 4 are pretty self-explanatory. The next 4 are a little bit more hidden. Number 5, visual. So if you throw in a measure into a card, there aren't any visual filters. If you throw a measure into a bar chart split up by customer category, for example, each bar is its own filter. So when you have category A, you're filtering down the data set and that measure to show a certain calculation. Category B is going to show a different calculation based on a different set of data. Number 6, if you drill through from one page to another and carry through filters, that will filter down your measure as well. Similarly with number 7, if you drill down into a specific hierarchy, that is going to carry some filters to your measure calculation as well. And although we're just talking through this in this intro video, we're going to walk through each of these examples. And then finally, number 8, if you are using a specific DAX formula called calculate, you can add filtering logic directly to the code. Each of these points is equally important because if you are creating a DAX measure and it's not calculating exactly as you would expect, you need to check each of these 8 places to see if there's a filter applied that you may not be aware of. 100% of the time, if you are sure that your measure logic is correct, you have a filter in one of these 8 locations that is changing that calculation in a way that you were not aware of. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into the first example, slicers. In this first example, we're going to talk about how slicers can affect your filter context, which is going to affect the way your measures calculate. So to get started, I'm going to get rid of our implicit measure card here. So now we just have our 2 visualizations, our card visual with our total sales measure, and then our total sales by order date. And now I'll add a slicer to the page with this slicer visualization. I'm simply going to add order date to this slicer. So let me find that in my sales orders table. And if you can't find it, you can just search for date or order date. Either will allow you to access it very quickly. I will take order date and throw that in the field, and that's going to create a nice date slicer. So now if I were to change my date range that I want to show my data for, we can see that my measure is changing. So my total sales within this time period is only around 41 million. And we can see that these numbers aren't necessarily changing, but it is constricting the dates that are showing up. We see that December 7th is the first date in my selection. If I were to make that a little bit later, we can see that the first date in my selection is now February 11th. By applying a different selection to the slicer, we are filtering down our data set and our calculation is changing. Another example, if we were to create another slicer, we have another column in our customer categories table. And let's expand this a little bit. I have customer category name. I'm going to throw that in the field. Now I have a list of customer category names. If I were to select novelty shop, we see that our calculation is even different. But at this point, we have applied this date range and this customer category name selection. So we are filtering down our data set based on 2 different columns, and that filter context has changed quite drastically. We can even see that the total sales split up by order date is now changing. For example, we're looking at about 106,000 for just novelty shop. With all of our customer categories, we're at 146,000. So quickly, this shows you how slicers will affect your filter context within your measure calculation. Similar to slicers, we can apply filters directly to the visual level filters for each individual visualization. For example, if I were to expand my date range out to where it used to be, so now my slicers aren't doing anything because I haven't selected anything on these two slicers. This is my full data set. If I were to click on this card visualization, for example, and open up the filters pane on the right side, we see the section for filters on this visual, and we can filter our data down from here directly. This is more of a static approach. Slicers allow the end users to make their selections, whereas the filter pane is more for the report author. So if I were to take the customer category name column again and throw that in the add data fields here option, I can now select a specific customer category or multiple. So if I were to select novelty shop and gift store and corporate, let's say those three customer categories, I have now filtered down this specific card visual to those specific customer categories. But we can see that if I click on my table, the same is not true. I haven't applied any filters to this specific visual. And to really nail this point home, if I were to click on computer store now, we will see that we'll have blank over here in the card because computer store wasn't one of the three customer categories. And since the table wasn't filtered down to any customer categories within the visual level filters, now the only filter is for computer store, which we still have some data for. We actually have $12 million of sales in that computer store customer category. So an important note is that if you have two very similar visuals and one is calculating to a different value than the other, and they should probably be the same, you might want to check the visual level filters apply to each individual visual. To fully understand the filter context, you also need to check the page level filters. These are found in a very similar place as the visual level filters. If I were to click on my card here and look at my filter pane, we can see that I still have my visual level filters. I'm going to actually clear those so that now my filter context is only under the influence of this single slicer selection that I have on the page. And if I collapse this down, we will see the section for filters on this page. And we can apply a filter directly here as well. So let me go ahead and grab a new field. Let's go to our order lines table and bring in quantity. So we'll throw that filters on this page. Let's say is greater than 10. Let's try that. And let's click apply filter. So now you can see that our data set has been filtered down even more. Our number is smaller, but it's interesting to note that this filter was applied to everything on this page. For example, this card that we've selected, this table, we see that we have that quantity filter on this page as well. We could add a new visualization and it would automatically be filtered down by that quantity filter. So to really nail it home, our quantity is affecting everything on the page as well as our slicer selection for computer store. So if I get rid of computer store again, we see that now we're just filtered down based on the quantity, and we can change this to, let's say, 15 and click apply filter, and our data set is changing. The last place that we can apply filters on this filter pane is the filters on all pages section or the report level filters. And this works the exact same as the page level filters, except it will be applied to each individual tab within your Power BI file. Pretty easy to understand, but let's walk through a quick example. Let me go back to the customer categories on the fields pane. Let's take our customer category name, throw it on filters on all pages. If I were to only select the customer categories for, let's say, novelty shop, gift store, and supermarket, just those three, we can see that our slicer is only showing these three options. Let's create a new tab here and throw in a new visualization. Let's just take a quick table and let's throw in those customer category names in the values. And we will see that we are only going to show those three individual customer categories. And that's because this filter is applied to every visualization on all pages by default. This finishes up the quick section on all of the different places that we can apply filters within the filter pane. The fifth place where filter context may be influenced is from the visualization itself. And this is probably the hardest concept to grasp around filter context because each individual visualization may apply a different filter context. As we've seen in previous examples, this card here isn't applying any filter context because it is just showing a single value of data, whereas this table is applying a certain filter context based on the date. For example, January 1st, 2013 is a specific portion of our orders dataset, so we only show a small number for the total sales for that one day, similar for January 2nd, 2013. Let's create a few more examples to really nail this point home. So I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of my card, I'm going to get rid of this table as well. Let's create a bar chart. Let's use this one right here. And I will resize this. And let's take our total sales and throw it in the values. So as you can see, there is a single bar and it is showing our total sales. And we do have some filters applied to this page. So I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of the filters applied to the page, filters applied to all pages. And now we're back up to our 177.63 million. That's our value with no filters applied. So right now, this bar chart is acting just like a card visual. There are no extra filters influencing this total sales measure. But if we were to throw something in the axis or the legend, it would split up those calculations into multiple calculations. So let's take our customer category name from the right side and throw that in the axis. And that's going to give us an x-axis of multiple customer categories. And as you can see, our total sales measure is now showing 5 different calculations, one for novelty shop, one for supermarket, one for gift store, and so on. We can take any other field from the right side and throw it in either the axis or legend and change the way that this measure is calculating. For example, if I go to sales orders and take my sales order date and throw this above my customer category name, I'm actually going to get rid of my customer category. So as you can see, we have this order date hierarchy, year, quarter, month, day. Based on that hierarchy, we are starting on the year level. So we have 4 years from 2013 through 2016. We have the ability to drill down into certain years. For example, if I drill down into 2015, we're now looking at quarter 1, 2, 3, 4. And I can drill into quarter 3, for example, and I see July, August, September. And just a reminder, this topic isn't specifically covering how drill down affects filter context. I'm just showing you that something in the axis of a visualization or the legend does apply a different filter context. So let's actually drill all the way up. So if we were to then add our customer category name into, let's say, the legend, it will split up all of these bars based on a certain color, based on a certain customer category. So now if you look at it, there are 4 or 5 different calculations for each year bar. So we have 5 calculations here, 5 here, 5 here, 5 here. That's 20 calculations on this visualization already. If I were to drill down even further, we'll have more and more calculations. By the end of it, when we drill down all the way to the day level, we have many different calculations for this single measure. One more quick example. Let's go ahead and create a donut chart. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to take the total sales and throw that in the values. And as you might expect, we will have one single colored bar with our total sales. And then I can throw in something similar to a customer category name again in either the legend or the details. And I can throw that in and see that our total sales are now split up again. And you know how Power BI works. If we click on a single customer category, we can filter down the other visualization based on that selection. So if I drill up real quick, so now I click on this visual, and now we've changed the filter context for all other visuals on the page. So just a quick note, when thinking about the filter context that a visual can apply, you have to think about what the visual actually visualizes. For example, the filter context on a donut chart is going to be a lot different than the filter context that's applied via a map or a visual similar to that. A map is going to show you geospatial data split up by states, for instance. So when trying to determine the filter context applied by a visual, you need to think of all the ways that that visualization is splitting up that data, be it via the axis, the legend, or the details. All the visualizations have different fields that allow you to subdivide that data, and each subdivision is going to alter that filter context. You also need to check the drill through actions within your Power BI file in order to fully understand the filter context. In order to demonstrate this, let's alter page 2. Let's actually make this a table with our customer category names and our total sales, just something that simple. So we have our 5 customer categories with our total sales, and I'm going to make this text a little bit larger. So let's actually search for text, and let's change that text size. Let's make it much bigger, and let's set up a quick drill through action from page 1 onto page 2. As you may know, you just need to add a field to the drill through filters on this page. So if I take my customer category name, throw it in the add drill through fields here. Now we have drill through set up already. So if we go back to page 1, we can drill through. Let's actually drill through from our donut chart. So when we right click on a certain segment, such as gift store, we can right click, drill through to page 2. And you'll actually see that our table is now filtered down to gift store. This is a pretty easy example to understand because we know what we just did. But if, for example, you saved this file and sent it to somebody, they might not actually understand that you had previously drilled through into gift store. They would just see that this filter has been applied and they wouldn't know why. So to actually make sense of this, in case you didn't actually see that drill through action performed, you need to come to the right side in the drill through actions here, and we'll actually see that gift store has a check mark by it. You have to click the eraser to get rid of it in order to show all of the values before that drill through action occurred. This is a really tricky one because if there looks to be a filter applied to a page, check the drill through because someone may have already drilled through previously and save the state of that drill through. Understanding the filter context from the drill through actions was pretty tricky, but I think the hardest factor to understand regarding filter context is actually drill down, as we're going to learn in this video. So let's go back to page 1. And we'll see that we can drill down into this specific bar chart. So if I were to drill down into 2015, that's actually going to affect this visualization here on the right. Let's actually do that again. So just taking the purple section as an example, we're at 127 million for that novelty shop purple section. If I were to drill into 2015, we'll see that we're actually looking at 39 million at this point. So there are actually filters being applied from the drill down action of this bar chart into the other visualizations on the page. We can even drill in further into Q3, for example, and we'll see that our numbers continue to shrink. So if we now click on this visualization here, we'll see that there are these filters applied to this visualization through those drill down actions, and they're actually static here. We're not able to reverse them. We can't erase them directly from the filter pane. We see that order date year is 2015, order date quarter is Q3, and that makes sense because we just performed those drill down actions, but we can't get rid of them here, and we'll actually see them on the bar chart as well. The only way to get rid of them is to actually reverse your drill down action, so we can actually just drill up back until we are at our main view of the data. So if I actually go through again and let's drill down to Q2, we can see it on the right side. And you may notice that you do have an eraser icon when you're actually on the visualization that you've drilled down from. So since I am drilling on my bar chart, I actually see the option to erase that quarter drill down and actually drill back up. But the better way is just to drill up based on your original drill down selections. So definitely be on the lookout for that. I will give you one last note, just kind of an idea to look out for in the future. If someone does drill down into a specific selection, let's drill into 2015 again, and they actually hide this visual for whatever reason, maybe they want to hide it now and maybe bring it back later, they can do that in the selection pane, they can hide it, and you'll actually still have this filter applied to our donut chart year 2015, but you have no idea where that actually came from. This is pretty advanced information, but I just want to let you know there are places that filters can hide that you really need to be cognizant of, and this is just one example. So if you can't understand why you have a locked filter in place, it might be because drill down had occurred previously and that visual is now hidden. So all you have to do is unhide it and drill back up, and it will erase that filter. Let's learn the final place that filters can hide regarding filter context, and that is in DAX code specifically. And that's actually specific to the calculate function within DAX. So let's actually create our first measure that uses the calculate function. We're going to cover this in way more depth in a later section of this course, but let's do a quick example. I'm going to right click on the measures table and create that new measure. And I'm just going to call this supermarket sales. And that's because I'm specifically going to filter down to only supermarket data. This might be handy in case you always want to show that supermarket data in a visualization regardless of the selections applied. And we can do that by using the calculate function. So if I type in calculate, we need to apply an expression. An expression needs to be something like a sum of total sales or another measure. I can actually reference my total sales measure and run the code from that total sales measure within this calculate function. So you can think of the total sales measure as just being the sum of that total price column. So we are going to run the sum of that total price column, but we can apply a specific filter within this calculate function. We can say something like customer category name equals supermarket. And that needs to be in quotes. So that is our entire calculate function. So running through it one more time, the most important thing to understand here is that the filters are applied first and then the expression is evaluated. What I mean by that is imagine that we have an entire data set. We have all of our customer categories available to us. we have all of the rows of our data set available to us. We filter that down to where customer category name equals supermarket. So now we have a subset of data, and then we run the total sales measure, or in other words, then we run that sum of total price column and we get our final numeric value. So with that, let's click enter, and now we have our supermarket sales measure. So let's actually throw this into a card visual. So I'm going to throw that up here. And let's throw in supermarket sales. And we see we're at 14.82 million. And we'll see that that's actually the pink section of this donut chart. It's also 14.82 million. So this calculation actually has another filter built into the DAX code. So if I now click on another customer category, such as novelty shop, this calculation will not be affected. The filter has been defined for that customer category of supermarket. So we're actually good to go there. Let's actually do one more example here. I am going to put this on top. Let's actually create a new card here. And let's get rid of that selection. Let's create one more measure that says, let's do 2015 total sales. And similarly, I'm going to type in calculate and call our total sales measure once again. But instead of using a customer category name of supermarket, let's say something along the lines of year of our order date equals 2015. And that year call is actually another function. It's actually just getting the year value of order date. So we're filtering down our entire data set to just data where the order date is from the year 2015. With that, let's click enter. And let's throw this into our values again in our card. So 2015 sales, let's throw that in. So now we are at 55.82 million. And we can still filter this down by other customer categories by giving it a different filter context. So that works as expected, but this will always be 2015 data. I can even filter down our data set to a smaller date range. For example, right now I'm only showing one day of data, January 1st, 2013. And we are still able to show that 2015 sales. And if you were just to open up this report for the first time and you see I filtered my data down to an order date of just that one day of data, how am I still showing 2015 sales? You actually need to open up the measure itself and see, oh, there's actually a filter applied directly within the code. And with that, those are the 8 different places where filter context can be applied. I know this might be a little bit of a dry subject, but it is the most important thing that you need to understand when learning to create measures, because you're going to have a very frustrating time in the beginning where you're wondering why your measure isn't evaluating the way you would like, and going through each and every one of these 8 steps and just making sure you have a full understanding of that entire filter context, you're going to be way better off, and creating measures is going to be much easier. Now that we have an extremely solid foundation on how to create a proper measure, let's go ahead and move into some of the most used functions within the DAX language. I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure you check out the full course over at training.bielite.com. Again, the link is down in the description. I hope to see you there.